This is Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm delighted that Ashish Puntambekar has joined me from Mumbai today. He's a known energy and markets expert. Some of his LinkedIn posts I've been reading for a long, long time. He has his own company. He, of course, spent some time with Reliance, now has his own company focused on South Asian renewables. And he's here to talk about what's really going to happen with these tariffs that everybody's talking about. He has a very contrarian perspective. And the first question I'm going to ask him is, one of the things he has suggested is that tariffs or no tariffs, a huge amount of money, up to $2 to $3 trillion of investments are likely to move from the US into India in the next few years. Ashish, welcome. Why do you believe this is true?
Hi, Hindol. Thanks for having me. See, I'll go back to 1945, 1943, 1942, when Roosevelt met Ibn Saud on the Red Sea. Yeah, and he established that Saudi relationship, which essentially meant that the United States would support the Saudi Arabian regime, the House of Saud, in return for the Saudis invoicing all their oil in US dollars. So that was the first consequential relationship that the Americans had. The second was when Nixon met Mao Zedong in China in February 1973. So these were the two consequential relationships that they had, and these two relationships are now unwinding. Okay, so they needed someone they needed one power to balance the unwinding of these two relationships, and the United States was working consciously towards that before this whole trouble with Trump started, right? So that is one part of it. The second issue is that the Americans are also, there's been less buying of the U.S. treasuries recently. So what happens is there has been some worry about I'm mentioning the various things, and then I'll put together the jigsaw, right? It's like the US bond markets are not so stable as they used to be once. So it's like a large lake which is going to it's like the Caspian Sea getting, seeing an outflow of water in a way. So when this water flows out, there has got to be some place to accommodate that water. And the other markets, the Chinese, in China, they cannot invest so much. They don't want to because the relationship is unwinding. So they have to, that money has to go somewhere, and it's going to come to India. They had been putting us on they've cleared the ways for the various indices. They included us, the Morgan Stanley index, the JP Morgan index. So they've been including us in these indexes to make way for that money to come. Yeah. And of course, they want to balance these two relationships. India, with its 1.4 billion people, out of which almost 450 million are middle class. So it's equivalent to it's a little less than the combined populations of Europe and the United States, this middle class, right? So this is a massive user of the US dollar. They're looking at it like that. See, and I'll tell you one more thing. See, in 2012, the Americans made a big assessment. The Pentagon made an assessment of what were the next threats that it was seeing. And at that time, 70% of American naval forces were in the Atlantic basin at that point in 2012, up to 2012. Then they started the shift. So 70% now of the American naval forces are in the Pacific. Only 30% are in the Atlantic, and they made up for that lack of forces in the Atlantic by moving their missile bases closer to the Russian borders. Right, so they expanded NATO. They got in Romania, they got in Bulgaria, they got in Poland. They were coming closer and closer to the Russian border, and that's where Vladimir Putin told them to stop. In 2015 and to 2017, Vladimir Putin said that's enough. Don't expand NATO anymore this side. So the Americans, moved their forces also, and that's why they, to the Pacific. They moved there. So it's not just financial strategy. This is also military strategy. And that's why they expanded the Asia Pacific, the term to make it Indo-Pacific. You see, there's been that thing has also happened. So they called Asia Pacific has become Indo-Pacific. They included us in the Quad, everything to counterbalance China. And the currency thing is just a part of it. So to stabilize the US dollar, because if the US dollar doesn't have too many users, you have a problem. So they have to pump in that much, $2 to $3 trillion has to be pumped into India to stabilize the US dollar and make us an effective bulwark against China. And that's why I believe all of this thing, the problems that we are having with the American tariffs is essentially noise. He sent this guy, a new envoy has been appointed to, he's being called the South Asian envoy, Asia, Central Asian and South Asian envoy, and he's also been the designate, the ambassador designate to India, a guy called
Igor,
what's his
yes.
Igor, yeah, Igor. So he has been appointed here. So my view is that when he comes, there will be a direct line to Trump. I'm not seeing whatever Elon Musk has said about him and other things. I don't think it is that serious a thing. I think the Americans are going to very quickly realize that this 50% tariff against India is not going to work. That see, policy in the United States, is made by a certain group of individuals, and they're mainly Jewish. Okay. So the big parties, they discuss things about abortion and they discuss things like that. But when it comes to foreign policy, they finally it is this group that decides and tells the president that he has to act in a certain way. I'm sure that has already been conveyed to the White House, that they have they've made a big mistake by making a mistake about India and this whole thing about tariffs. And Trump was essentially trying to play poker, and we just told him that we called his bluff. So he has got to go back. See, he's a businessman. He will retract and he'll get back the old regime. I think by November, the whole thing will be back on track, and there shouldn't be any problem with the US that the money flows will happen.
Let's talk a little bit about energy, which is where the whole dispute, at least notionally, is anchored in. We
Hmm.
all know that the Biden administration asked India to buy large volumes of Russian oil to stabilize oil prices in the global markets. And indeed, after that, and which is why India finds this particularly hypocritical, the whole thing flipped over with, voices in the US complaining about India buying oil, and then with the Trump regime, this entire thing about punishing India for buying Russian oil. Even though, of course, a lot of the oil that India bought was finally refined in India and bought by the US's great partners, NATO partners in Europe. It is those countries that bought that oil. It's just that, it was, in a sense, it passed through India, given a different name, refined, of course, and then they bought it. And there is, of course, this multi-layered hypocrisy in all of this. But I want you to talk a little bit, not so much about the politics, but about the oil markets and the energy markets, and how you see those panning out from here on as these tariffs come on to India. What happens to Russian oil? Do you see the markets getting destabilized? Do you see oil prices going up? How do you see that panning out?
Before we get into oil, I'll just like to make a comment about the summit that's happened in Alaska. See, since the time of Obama, the Americans made a big blunder by pushing Russia into the arms of Xi Jinping and North Korea. Okay, by the Europeans have always seen themselves as a European. The Russians have always seen themselves as European. They have never seen themselves as Asian. So with sanctions against Russia and sanctions, going against Putin. See, Putin was doing nothing wrong. One has to understand, Putin did no wrong. He essentially told them in 2015, 2017 to stop expanding NATO. He said, don't come anymore. Don't put nuclear missiles any closer to Russia's borders. And they didn't. And it was the grand plan thought about by the Clintons of cornering Russia and expanding NATO. See, so it was Hillary Clinton, right? So what I'm saying is that they pushed I call him brother Vladimir into Xi's arms. Now the Trump administration and the Republican Party wanted to undo that mistake. So the Alaska summit was not so much about Ukraine, but it was more about getting the Russians back on the side of the West. Because if there's a future conflict, putting it would be very stupid on the part of the Americans to have Russia on the side of China and North Korea. So this big reset of giving Russia back its European identity was extremely necessary. So having said that, we'll come to oil. Of course, the Biden administration asked us to purchase Russian crude, and Indian companies did that. And so now the thing with Trump is, if he is trying, he said reset that essential relationship with Russia, right? Now he is going to force. I feel the Americans will make sure that there's a settlement reached in Ukraine. I think in the next 3-4 months, this entire thing about Ukraine is going to die down. Okay. And then the oil markets and the entire problem with buying Russian oil is also going to evaporate. So it's essentially, I don't think this thing is going to last beyond November. So I don't see a problem. And what will happen is oil prices will come off. Okay. Unless there is a problem and China tries to get into Taiwan. Because that is the next thing that I'm seeing happening. So there's a big change happening around the world. So I'm seeing Ukraine going down and this Taiwan thing, blowing out. So that's what I'm seeing on the whole stage. And India and the US will come back together to renew that partnership. After November, I'm seeing everything going absolutely okay.
Tell me a little bit about the work that you do now in renewables. There is, of course, India now gets about roughly 50% of its energy needs from renewable sources. And that is, of course, consistent. The idea is that it has to keep going up. Very recently, Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated Suzuki's great plant, which from where the e-Brezza, which is the electric Brezza car, will be exported into 100 countries. Now, obviously, there is this play here between India and Japan to try and, in some senses, get a toehold in the competition in this vehicles market, which is happening between the US and, of course, China, with China taking a big leap, going much ahead, even the US in this domain. But of course, there's clearly an effort by India and Japan now to get into that market. How are you seeing the renewables market play out, especially in the dissemination and the proliferation of e-vehicles?
See, before I come to renewables, I'd like to speak about the energy industry itself, right, in India. So I had this discussion with Daniel Yergin, one of the biggest minds in the energy business, and I was talking to him about how much Indian oil demand would expand. And he said, Ashish, oil demand in India is actually going to go from around, essentially, it will increase from by at least 50 to 100%. So before electric vehicles and all that happens, because that's a huge shift. First, we are going to increase our oil demand. Okay, so that is a given. Second thing is that we built our energy networks wrongly in India. Okay, the oil network, especially the way we have positioned our refineries. In 2008, I wrote an article from the Indian Defense Review for the Indian Defense Review, talking about India's strategic reserve and how it needs to be built. So what has happened is we have, taken a American concept. It was, Eisenhower who first, sanctioned the American crude oil petroleum reserve, and that's why the giant tanks in Louisiana and everything were built. It was President Johnson many years later who, made it happen, right? The U.S. petroleum reserve. But our situation is very different from the Americans. See, we are we've got hostile neighbors, and the way the government of India has executed the petroleum reserve is completely wrong. I had written the article, and they took the article without, in India, they don't consult the guy who's thought about the whole thing. Okay, this is what they do. So they've spent almost $12 billion, not $12 billion, around 12,000 crores, $1.5 billion, completely wrongly. Okay, so they built our major refineries are near the Pakistani border along the Salai Mathura pipeline, and the petroleum reserve is in Bangalore. Okay, and they have not connected the reserve to the petroleum to the refineries with a pipeline, which normal, the reserves in Louisiana are connected to refineries in the some of the refineries in the United States, and they feed the Cushing, Oklahoma system. We don't have that kind of network. So if the refineries are attacked for any reason in any future conflict with Pakistan, the reserve is completely useless. So that is not how I had written this article. I had written it in a very different manner, and they completely took that's why when somebody writes something, it has to be, you have to consult the guy who has written it. So they didn't do that. And they spent 12,000 crores just like that. So what I'm saying is that the Indian system has been built wrongly. We've got all our, refineries along the Pakistan, a lot of them, a majority of our large, almost 63 million barrels, million tons a year is located near the Pakistani border. And the consumption centers, the fastest growing areas in states in India are actually Telangana and Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. The growth essentially was happening in Gujarat and Maharashtra, but those growth rates have slightly slowed down. The fastest growth is happening on the East Coast. So our next energy network, and I'm sure in the next conflict that we have with Pakistan, the government of India is going to realize that we have built our energy network wrongly. And this network is going to shift to something which I call the East Coast Energy Corridor. So I designed the East Coast Energy Corridor when I was still with Reliance, and I designed the whole system so that everything would come. And the East Coast Energy Corridor is not like the Salai Mathura pipeline. It is a petroleum multi-product petroleum pipeline, petroleum product pipeline. So what will happen is during normal times, this is I'll just explain. The Salai Mathura system is like this, right? It runs from the Gulf of Kutch to Mathura, Panipat, and Bhatinda. It runs like this. Whereas the East Coast Energy Corridor will run like this. It will run from the Andhra Pradesh on the Andhra Pradesh Delhi axis. So during normal times, what will happen is the refineries on the west along the Pakistani border will export their petroleum product, and they'll be able to actually increase their sales by exporting product through this East Coast Energy Corridor and to the eastern coast states. So they'll be able to, from the northwest, petroleum product will be able to reach eastern coast states, and they will be able to export into the Singapore market. Now, if there is a upset in the Gulf of Kutch region due to conflict in the region or anything else, we'll be able to import product because this is a bidirectionally flowing pipeline, and we'll be able to import product from the East Coast. So this is going to be, it will be a 48-inch multi-product, multi-batch pipeline, which will be built. Okay, so my view is that it will cost around 60,000 crores to build this system. I've done the, entire, it includes military pipelines also. So, which basically the military pipelines are needed to stabilize oil supply to the existing refineries if there is an attack. So that's what the system is, and it will pay for itself in a couple of days. Actually, some part of that entire 60,000 crores will be paid for itself because the GDP loss from potential conflict and a harming of our current system will be around $150 billion in my view. Okay, so this pipeline is only around $6.89 billion, and immediately it will pay for itself. So I think government of India is going to very quickly shift the axis for India's energy supplies, and it will be a far more stable axis. Now, having spoken about oil, I'll come now to renewables. See, the East Coast Energy Corridor is actually includes two systems. The first part of it is correcting the wrong that we have done for the last 40 years, which is the supply of gasoline, diesel, and kerosene. Okay, these three commodities have to be guaranteed for supply to India. So that part one of the East Coast Energy Corridor, which is essentially it comes with $100 billion investment, which will accompany this pipeline. So Andhra Pradesh, in my view, is going to be the most important state from now on for the supply of petroleum products into India. It is the Gulf of Kutch is going to wane in its importance, in my view. The second thing is the other $300 billion. This East Coast Energy Corridor is actually a $400 billion project. The rest of the $300 billion will be in renewables and in nuclear. Okay, so there'll be hydrogen, there will be solar, wind, and we need, and it's also got a part of for in this East Coast Energy Corridor that repairs the damage done to the glaciers. So that's a 6-part project. I have only published part one of it right now. So there's going to be around $300 billion of investment that will come into the renewable space. That's what my plan is actually.
And you're saying all of this will happen in what timeline?
See, by 2030, I feel the government, the government doesn't take a very long time to shift its view. India does not act till there's a crisis. It has been known since for a very long time that until a sword is placed at our throat, we won't act. Okay, I'll give you an example. Till we did not reform the economy till 1990. And there's a small story. If we have time, I can cover that. See, there was this. We were just 1 week of forex reserves left, and Manmohan Singh, just before the weekend, he told, Narasimha Rao, who was prime minister at that time, he told Manmohan Singh, Chidambaram, and Montek Singh Ahluwalia to come up with a plan. So on Sunday morning, these three gentlemen landed up at his house, and Gurcharan Das has written about this in his book right in the beginning, India Unbound. It's worth reading. So these three guys landed up at his house, and he was having his breakfast, dosa, and all that in his garden. And the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and he asked Manmohan Singh, who was leading the group, that. Have you finished the work? And he said, yes, we have. And he said, so he handed to him a 2-page paper. And Narasimha Rao took a couple of minutes to read it. And then he looked at Manmohan Singh and he said, basically what the three of you are saying is that we should unwind all the controls we have put onto the country in the last 60 years. Are you saying that? So he said, yes, that's what I'm saying. And it's important to understand because Manmohan Singh was a socialist. He was an avowed socialist, right? And for him to say that I want an unwinding of reforms meant that he had understood that it wasn't working, right? The socialism thing wasn't working. So he said, yes, I agree. This is what I'm saying. And then Narasimha Rao looked at Chidambaram and he looked at Montek Singh and he said, do you agree with him? And they said, yes. So Narasimha Rao said, get me my pen. I want to sign this. And then, if you remember, many of us were in college at that time, and within a week, all these, clearances and reforms came in, and within a month, a lot of things changed in India. So I'm saying that this move on the energy.
Something similar is about to happen in the energy markets in India?
Yes, the entire energy map of India is going to change. It will change. And I think that's the big shock that's coming. People don't realize the power of ideas. And you can oppose an idea up to a point, then finally merit has to, matter. And this East Coast Energy Corridor, which I've been pushing for several years, will happen for sure.
What are the few big things that will change if this happens?
See, growth will move to Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh has just got, currently it's got just one refinery. I think HPCL is putting up a plant, in a refinery in Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh will receive around $60 billion worth of investment. Currently, it's $6 billion. It's going to go up by a factor of 10, in my view. So Andhra Pradesh will be the next, center of the energy industry. And I'll clarify one point. See, today, why did we not? We've got 184, I think 184 million tons of oil refining capacity along the west coast. And we've got around only 54 million tons around the East Coast. And this was mainly because this was mainly because there's a 70-cent differential between moving crude oil from the between a West Coast port, let's say Jamnagar, and East Coast port, let's say Vizag. Okay, so I feel the two ports of Gangavaram and Krishnapatnam would be the new centers of the energy business in India. That's my view.
And we're saying this could attract up to $60 billion?
Yes, it will attract a huge amount of investment from the Middle East. A lot of sovereign wealth funds will invest in it. And I think close to 60 to about, if you look at both the $100 billion part, which is conventional energy, and you look at the $300 billion worth of clean energy projects, uh, close to over $100 billion of forex will come into this. To 60 to $100 billion of investment is going to come into India. I can say this with considerable certainty. Yes.
Let me conclude this conversation with a last topic that I want to discuss with you. Where do you see the renewables market go? This is as far as the energy markets in terms of traditional energy is concerned. What about the
Yeah. Yeah.
renewables market? I was talking to you a little while ago about Suzuki's great effort to, get a toehold
Yeah.
perhaps in the global e-vehicles market. Of course,
Yeah.
solar is a big part of the puzzle. And of course, there's wind and other kinds of energy. Where do you see that going in India? Because there's a lot of push. We get, as I was saying, up to 50% of our needs from renewables today. And, we have Paris commitments, to fulfill. And we're constantly pushing towards that direction.
Hmm. See, as far as clean energy is concerned, again, I'll come back to why a shift to clean energy. Why? That there's a reason why that will happen, right? See, oil is a marginal pricing business. Crude oil is a marginal pricing commodity. So you have to replace that marginal barrel with a cheaper offering to make the demand for crude collapse. Okay, so what will happen is usually what used to happen for many decades, okay, the oil markets used to control the big oil companies, used to influence the amount of financing. Basically, it was a finance game, right? So they used to influence the amount of financing going into clean energy. Somewhere around 2004, 2005, that thing switched. So you had in that particular year, I'm forgetting the exact number, but more money went into clean energy finance. It was, really around $500 billion used to go into the conventional energy market. In that year, 2003, 4, I'm forgetting, I used to maintain those numbers. In that year, more money started going into the clean energy space. So now clean energy will expand considerably. It will expand, and I think a lot of we've not even started in India. Building those gigafactories. We've got some in Gujarat, but I think a lot of them will come up in Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and places like that. So a lot of and even rare earth processing facilities, right? So we will be doing tie-ups with Quad countries, maybe Australia. We'll be doing some of the linking up will happen with Russia, with African countries. Because if you remember, during his first term, Narendra Modi went and visited a lot of. He went and visited a lot of African countries, mainly Kenya. He went to Tanzania. He went to a lot of these countries, right? He went and visited them. So I think some of the oil reserves along the African coast will also be developed. A lot of LNG will come from Africa. Okay. Uh, a lot of rare earth processing capacity for the clean energy business to black it will be based on relationships with Australia. So the Quad will end and Japan. So a lot of Japanese investment will come into the East Coast. I think a tremendous amount of Japanese and Saudi and other investment will come. So that's how I'm seeing these flows happen, and there will be a huge explosion in clean tech. But I think one point I want to make is you cannot build too much of solar and wind capacity along the east coast, mainly because of the cyclone. So if you build a solar farm in Andhra Pradesh, it's likely to get, picked up and thrown 300 kilometers into the country because of the sheer wind velocities that you have. So a lot of development maybe in geothermal will happen, and this will be, a different kind of deep geothermal will happen in the area. So I think that's what I'm seeing, that a lot of deep geothermal activity, and South Asia Renewables is, thinking about these projects. We are thinking a lot about clean energy and how to develop it. And we are a small company with very big ideas. So, concerned parties may contact us to, get some really, really large kind of ideas that, because, we are a small company with an excess capacity in design. We've got a huge excess capacity in design, and we can use it. We can collaborate with others to grow their businesses. So that's something that we'd be very willing to do.
Excellent. On that optimistic note, Ashish, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate you taking off time to discuss all these issues at length with us. No doubt we will be back talking to you more as the story evolves. The energy
Yeah.
story is not going away anywhere. In fact, many would say it is now going to become even more critical as the days go by, because not only is there a transition coming from traditional energy to renewables, but as you're saying, in the short term or medium term at least, traditional energy is not going anywhere. So all the concerns, all the battles that have been fought on it are not going away anywhere, and India is increasingly a pivot where all of this will play out. Thanks very much, Ashish Puntambekar, for taking off time to talk to me about these issues. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Hindol. Thanks for having me. It was excellent talking to you. Thank you.